Well, good morning. This is Mac Morris. I'm the meteorologist at the National Weather Service here in the climate focal point for the Austin San Antonio office. This is your fall seasonal outlook and just a summer in review. It was yet another hot summer, however, not as hot as our record-breaking 2023. Del Rio had its second warmest on record, June, July, and August behind 2023. Now, La Nina conditions are forecast to develop. They'll likely be weak, typically drier and warmer than normal conditions through the winter locally, with some exceptions. Now, drought is expected to persist this fall, but it may even be removed in portions of the Hill Country and Edwards Plateau, depending on fall rains. Our long-term drought impacts are expected to continue despite improvements to short-term drought in recent months. A look back at this past summer, it was cooler than 2023, but still above normal temperatures for June, July, and August. We had periods of rain between hot stretches that helped to avoid significant drought issues, and above normal rain for the Hill Country, Edwards Plateau, and I-35 and coastal plains areas. San Antonio had its fifth warmest summer. 2023 was the warmest. They had 27 100-degree days compared to around 80 last year, and it was the 58th wettest summer. At Mabry, seventh warmest summer. 2023 was the second warmest. They had 30 100-degree days, and it was the 54th driest summer on record. And meanwhile, at Austin Bergstrom, typically a little bit cooler than downtown Austin, has 25th warmest summer. 2023 was the warmest, 10 100-degree days, and it was the 25th wettest summer. And finally, at Del Rio, second warmest summer. 2023 was the warmest. They have had 91 100-degree days. That's tied for most all time with just last year, and it was the 24th driest summer on record. In terms of rainfall, as of September 1st, we're doing relatively well in the short term, but long-term rainfall is still between 25 and 75% of normal. As you see on the bottom right there, the 180-day rainfall for a 6-month period. Anywhere basically from Del Rio eastward through San Antonio and south and westward has had below normal rainfall, and right around normal to slightly above normal for portions of the Hill Country, I-35 corridor, and the coastal plains. And dry period did begin after our unusual round of rainfall in late July, but we did get some decent rainfall just a couple of weeks ago here in early September. Fall typically sees a little ramp up in increased severe weather chances relative to July and August, but it's still somewhat rare for severe weather during the fall. Flash flooding is typically our greatest threat. Use a secondary peak, but less so than May, June, and July, and typically begin experiencing pleasant temperatures about mid to late October as we start to see some fall cold fronts work their way back into the area. The Climate Prediction Center 8 to 14-day outlooks for September 26th through October 2nd, leaning likely above normal temperatures and near normal precipitation to maybe slightly below normal for south central Texas. The outlook for ENSO calls for La Nina to develop, looks likely for winter with a possible switch to ENSO neutral by late spring 2025. You notice that graph on the bottom left there, those blue lines indicate a 70 to 80% chance of La Nina through about December, January, and February before starting to decrease those odds towards the spring months and then heading towards perhaps neutral conditions by late spring, early summer next year. However, despite the fact we do have a La Nina forecast, it looks like it's going to be a relatively weak La Nina, which is a little bit more iffy on teleconnections, despite the fact that we're still expecting warmer than normal and drier than normal conditions. Here are some of those teleconnections I was mentioning. Usually means warmer on the left conditions for our area and drier than normal on the right conditions for south central Texas. But it only takes one heavy rain event to really help things out, so we'll see how things play out over the next couple of months. In terms of what exactly La Nina is, it is a buildup of cold eastern equatorial Pacific waters that leads to a generally warm and dry pattern across our region in south central US, including Texas, through the fall and winter. That means mostly just because the jet stream is displaced further to the north, resulting in a less active storm track and fewer storm systems coming through the area, bringing rainfall to south central Texas. This is not a sure bet, but it is the most likely scenario. Fall temperature outlook from the CFS model, the climate forecast system, is a mid to long range model that does suggest warmer than normal temperatures continuing through the fall. and even stronger anomalies are forecast to continue through the winter. Those are not shown here. In terms of precip, rainfall outlook, not looking great. CFS model does suggest below normal October, November, and December precipitation once again, with a rough estimate of about 20% reduction in fall precip for South Central Texas. Climate Prediction Center's October temperature and rainfall outlook does call for odds leaning towards above normal temperatures in October and towards below normal rainfall in October. But those odds are relatively right around near normal, so see how things play out. But for the most part, expecting above normal temperatures and slightly below normal precipitation. And the fall temperature and rainfall outlook for October, November, and December does call for above normal temperatures, looking likely on average for the October through December period, and the likely below normal precipitation expected for the next couple of months here. In terms of the drought outlook, we did have some decent rainfall just a couple of weeks ago over the western part of the area into the Rio Grande Plains and Southern Edwards Plateau and portions of the hill country. However, most of that has only had short-term impacts. Streamflow and reservoirs do remain quite low, and they're now getting back down to record low levels in some spots. So our late summer rains did bring significant short-term drought relief. However, long-term drought does continue. Those improvements largely came around the periphery of our area. The Climate Prediction Center does anticipate drought conditions continuing, but they could possibly improve or be removed portions of the area this fall. As you see on that graphic on the right, the green area would be possible drought removal, but the gray or tan area means drought is likely to persist but could improve. We'll see how that plays out for our area, but we have had some decent rain just a couple of weeks ago, but it has been warm and dry since then. So in terms of rainfall, we do still need quite a bit of rainfall to get back to where we need to be. Fire weather outlook for this fall does call for continued dryness that will dominate along the I-35 corridor. This is the Keach-Byram Drought Index, a measurement of moisture deficiency. It remains elevated in many locations, but it's vastly improved along the Rio Grande and in the hill country after a wet start to September. Nevertheless, that forecast and outlook calling for continued warmth and dryness will lead to degradation of this depiction. The fall fire weather outlook does call for continued concerns for fire weather conditions to develop towards the end of the fall months, towards December. I'll get to that here in a second, but this is the energy release components. Once they get up towards that green line or purple line, then we become more concerned. But for now, they're relatively around average or just below normal, just because we had some decent rainfall a couple weeks ago. But they have been on the rise somewhat over the last couple of weeks. The wildland fire potential is currently low to moderate, but each passing dry and warm day does allow fuels to dry, and fall cold fronts are around the corner, which would result in drier and cooler than normal conditions. We do have a susceptibility to wildland fire. It's expected to increase over the coming weeks and months. Like I mentioned, here's that fall fire weather outlook. The National Interagency Coordination Center does issue outlooks update first of each month. They suggest an expansion of above normal wildland fire risk in December if conditions continue to stay warm and dry for South Central Texas. Turning our eyes to the tropics, there has been some info in the news lately about a possible tropical system developing in the Western Caribbean or the Southern Gulf next week. There are enhanced chances for tropical cyclone development over the Western Caribbean Sea this next week, but we must watch it closely, and it's important to follow official hurricane sources like the National Hurricane Center at hurricanes.gov. For all your official information. Chances for any Texas impacts, though, will rapidly diminish in 2 to 3 weeks' time. That's usually because October hurricanes, tropical storms are not particularly common in Texas, mostly because we usually start seeing cold fronts work their way south, forcing any system to stay to the east or south of Texas. In summary, heavy rain, flash flooding, river flooding, we're expecting near to below normal impacts due to antecedent dryness and low stream flow in September, and an outlook leaning towards drier than normal conditions this fall. But once again, all it takes is one heavy rain event, so important not to let our guard down. Fire weather is expected to be near normal impacts, but could ramp up towards the end of the fall. And tropical weather, likely normal impacts or slightly or near normal impacts. There's still a relatively busy hurricane season, but for us, things should start to quiet down as we get into October, as storms are quite rare at that time of year for Texas. And then our drought, expecting near normal impacts from drought, may be slightly above normal, with possible improvements if any decent rain event does occur this fall. Long-term impacts are expected to continue through the spring. Thank you very much.